Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valerie Nielsen. I'm the Interim Executive Director at the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. We're so excited to have you join us today to talk about Vision Zero. We have a great lineup today. First, we're going to hear from Leah Shahum from the Vision Zero Network to talk about what Vision Zero is, what local municipalities and partner agencies can do. You might know a little bit about Vision Zero already, or this might be new to you. So we're really excited about this. She's also going to highlight some funding opportunities that are in the pipeline for planning and infrastructure for safety improvements. Then we're going to hear from Shamai Nago from the Federal Highway Administration Office of Safety and some safe systems approach that you can implement in your communities. And then we're going to have a discussion with some local municipalities from Hillsborough, MPO to Charlotte, North Carolina, along with Leah Shahum. And then finally, we're going to zoom back into Palm Beach County and hear from Andrew, who's our Deputy Director of Program Development, to talk about what's the situation here in Palm Beach County, what can we do about it, and the TPA's resources and how we can help and work together to advance safety in our county. We're definitely trying to get more of our partners and local municipalities on board with Vision Zero. So we really appreciate your time this afternoon, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&A after each one of these presentations and roundtable discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leah, and thank you all for your time.
Thanks so much, Valerie. Huge thanks, Valerie, Andrew, and the whole TPA team. And I'm thrilled to see so many people on the call. Thank you. Happy Friday, everybody. My name is Leah Shahum, and I'm the founder and director of a nonprofit group called the Vision Zero Network. And we basically work like this, exactly like this, talking with folks who are interested in Vision Zero, how to really make the change. We're really lucky to work with federal agencies. You'll hear from Shamai Nago after me, sharing some really, really exciting, I'd say, policy and funding opportunities for safety for communities like yours. She'll talk about that. And then, as Valerie mentioned, we're going to bring on what we think are some peer agencies to learn how they have been implementing Vision Zero. So hoping today that we're really going to talk kind of quickly, obviously we're going to talk quickly. We don't have a lot of time, but a little bit about kind of what is Vision Zero? How is it different? Why does it make a difference? And then what are opportunities you'll have if you're interested to actually get funding and pursue Vision Zero policies and practices? And then also learn kind of some best practices and lessons learned from people who've been in this for a little bit. So I'm going to start with that. And let me get going here. First, I want to mention that I'm really excited to be working with you all again. I've been happy to be in touch with you guys for many years now, and have been really impressed with the work that's happening in the area. I was born and raised up in Jacksonville, Florida, so not too far away. And it's always fun to be working with Florida folks. All right, I'm gonna get going here. Okay. Oops, sorry, 1 second. I'm just getting my bearings. All right, let me go back, sorry. Okay, so yeah, like I mentioned, we're going to cover kind of what is the issue, why are we here today? I have a feeling we're all here for the same reason. How do we make our safety work more effective? So how do we do that with Vision Zero and what's called the safe system approach? I'll kind of cover that at a high level. And then I know Shamai with Federal Highway Administration is going to go deeper dive on that. We'll talk about the really stepped up national commitment and what that could mean to your work in the very near term. Some really exciting opportunities coming up literally in the coming weeks, months, years. And then really circle back to really what works. So what are we finding most encouraging out there? Great. So why we're here, I probably don't need to tell you this because it is why we're all doing the work we're doing, but we have what we call a crisis, a traffic safety and health crisis in this country. In 2020, there were more than 42,000 traffic deaths, millions more injuries in the US. And these are preventable crashes. That's something Vision Zero really helps draw attention to. This is not the way it has to be. This is not the everyday being. We really can make a change here. And we know that some communities are suffering more than others. For instance, amongst youth, traffic deaths are the leading cause of death amongst youth in this country and internationally. So, if this doesn't draw our attention, if this doesn't, kind of wake us up and say, hey, we need to be doing things differently, I don't know what does. We also know that certain modes, how we get around. It's getting, unfortunately, oops, sorry, one second. We know that traffic deaths amongst people walking are increasing. Just in the last about 10 years, we've seen an increase of 45% amongst people walking. And we know that is a severe problem. And really what we're talking about with Vision Zero and the safe systems approach is saying, okay, why are these things happening? It's not just that we are, not being safe out there. And I just want to pause and say, as our traffic deaths have increased, specifically, you probably read the news, as traffic deaths numbers and rates have increased in the US over the last few years, particularly during the pandemic, even though a lot more people were home and not taking trips, other countries were not experiencing that. So places, for instance, that we consider similar, the European Union, their traffic death numbers and rates decreased when there were fewer trips. And that makes sense, right? Unfortunately, in the US, that hasn't been happening. Our traffic death numbers and rates have increased, and they've been increasing, unfortunately, but particularly in these last 2 years. So stepping back and thinking, okay, why is this? Again, it's not that, individuals are this or that, better drivers, worse drivers. It really is looking at the systems we're in. So I'm sharing this image to kind of, frame this big picture that we get the results we design for. And I want to share a little bit. I'm sure, unfortunately, you guys have seen these numbers as well, that within the US, Florida is trending particularly badly in terms of traffic deaths. We know that the rates are higher than average, and unfortunately, the worst in the country. So really appreciate you all focusing on this. Again, knowing that according to the Complete Streets Coalition, you see a cluster of the most dangerous cities for people walking are in Florida. So I don't want to dwell too long. This is the why we're here. Let me switch or pivot to the fact that we can make change. And that's why you're here today. Again, I want to commend your team, the TPA there, for really acknowledging that these traffic deaths and injuries are preventable. We can make change. And that's what we want to focus on today. So thinking about what's next. And what we're seeing is across the country, public agencies, folks like you all at city, county, regional, state levels, not only transportation agencies, also public health agencies, school agencies, police agencies, everywhere across the board, people really stepping up and saying enough is enough. We do want to make change. And also in the community. This is a photo of a rally a few years ago of a group called Families for Safe Streets. There's chapters across the country now. Sadly, these are folks who've either been injured themselves in a crash or often who've lost a loved one in a preventable crash. So these are folks coming together and again saying, we want to change the systems. We want to make our roads safer. And if there's one thing maybe you take away, it's a small thing because it's words, but it's a big thing in terms of impression. Part of what this movement is really helping is helping us think about what we can and cannot control. So thinking about the word accident, right? Oh, there are traffic accidents. Well, that's the way we've always called it. I know that's the way I've grown up, thinking of it as an accident. And let me say, I'm not talking about who's at fault, the individuals per se, but could this thing have been prevented? The word accident really implies, something happened that we couldn't have prevented, a meteor falling out of the sky and some terrible, tragedy. When in fact, these crashes, and we'll look at this, these crashes are largely predictable and preventable. So when we call something a crash rather than accident, in a way, it's implicitly showing, hey, we have agency over this. We as system designers, as policymakers, as individuals too, as car designers, vehicle manufacturers, policymakers, all of these things, we do have agency. And we want to really think about how do we best flex and use that agency. So this is a map showing more than 45 communities across the US that have made this commitment to Vision Zero. And let me just pause and be clear. So I'm really explicit. The goal of Vision Zero is zero traffic deaths or severe injuries amongst all road users. So people driving, people walking, people biking, people using scooters, skateboards, transit. It's everyday transportation, everyday mobility. I really think about it. So the goal of Vision Zero is that everyone is safe, no matter how they're getting around, whether they're going to school, to work, it's their everyday mobility. So this is a goal that I'm thrilled to say just in the past, relatively quickly, past 6, 7, now let's say 7 years, more than 45 communities have committed to, and it's growing, and we'll we'll talk more about that. So I'm not going to talk about everything, obviously, in this short time around Vision Zero. Other folks will add too, but I do want to recommend, if the concepts are new to you or you're not yet working on Vision Zero, I'd really recommend checking out some basic resources we have. There's a document on our website, which is visionzeronetwork.org, spelled out zero, visionzeronetwork.org. The Vision Zero core elements. It's something we developed with the Institute of Transportation Engineers about what these core elements are. We also have a 1-hour webinar, Vision Zero 101. You can watch that recording, and et cetera. So again, I want to be clear, we're not going to go through everything here, but some of the highlights, but there's a lot more online to check out. So I'm going to start with what Vision Zero is not. We're going to get into what it is, but what Vision Zero is not. And I think this is really important. Vision Zero is not just a slogan. It's not just a tagline. It's not even just a program. It is those things. We use them that way, but Vision Zero is more importantly and fundamentally a paradigm shift. It is thinking differently and doing differently. And it is a focus on the safe systems approach, which we'll talk about. And I know Shemai is going to cover as well. At a really high level, some of the ways that Vision Zero differs from the traditional approach are outlined here. Again, a lot more online, but one basic, I'll cover a couple of these. One basic is with the traditional approach, even if we don't say it explicitly, it's implicit that, oh, traffic deaths are inevitable. You know, historically, whether you're a city, a county, a state, even the nation, we've set these goals of, oh, let's reduce traffic deaths by 2%, maybe 10%, or hey, let's not let traffic deaths increase. But when we pause and think about it, that's a troubling goal, right? If we were actually planning, even not consciously, but to say, okay, we're allowing, or we're going to be complacent, or I shouldn't say complacent, but allowance of like our traffic death numbers are this high. We just don't want them to get worse. Well, in fact, our goal should be safety for everyone, right? So thinking about whether it's another public health issue, gun violence. Obviously, our goal is for 0 people to be killed, in gun violence. Think about polio from years back. Think about the pandemic today, right? The goal is safety for everyone. And even if that is a very ambitious goal, and even if baseline, there's still going to be some incidents, to set that goal of 0 and to be explicit, to say, yeah, what we're doing, the policies we're setting, the plans we're making, the designs we're coming up with, the way we're making funding decisions, all of those are decisions and processes going on with the goal of safe mobility for everyone. What we found, looking at other countries and now looking at some of the communities that are doing it in the US, what we found is we're doing differently. So policymakers, planners, engineers, public health and police, when they're thinking about the goal of 0 and really serious about that, we make different decisions. So I'm going to give some examples of that. One other piece I'll just mention here is this second one of the idea of perfecting human behavior versus kind of integrating human failing in the approach. And that sounds funny to say, oh, we're going to accept human failing, but that's pretty baseline to Vision Zero. It's a more honest approach. Are humans ever going to be perfect? No. Even with the promise of autonomous vehicles, there's still mistakes. People program these vehicles, right? We program technology. There are still going to be mistakes. So let me be clear. Vision Zero is not saying we'll have 0 crashes. The goal isn't 0 crashes. Sure, we want to minimize crashes, but we're still going to have crashes. But if those crashes are less severe, if those crashes end in a broken ankle or a fender bender, that's unfortunate, but it's not obviously fatal. It's not severe. So that is our goal, is really how we lessening. So this image is really getting at that safe systems approach, which I've referred to a few times. And this is an image or an approach, this kind of diagram called the spectrum of prevention. It's used often in the world of public health. And if there's any public health folks on, thank you. We need you. We're learning from you a lot in the traffic safety world. So you can really apply this to anything from, say, disease control to, again, another issue like gun violence. We're now going to apply it more and more to traffic safety. So what this is really showing is that all these levels are important. Every single one of them is very important. We traditionally, and I'd say still today, we're still focusing a lot, mostly on these bottom rungs. Those are promoting community education and strengthening individual skills. So we do put a lot of energy into, hey, learn the rules, be safe, be seen, drive safely. Those are important. We don't want to stop doing those, of course. Those are very important. But thinking about Vision Zero and the safe system approach, we also need to acknowledge, again, people are going to make mistakes. People are not perfect. So how do we use policy and legislation and organizational practices? Specifically, how do we use systems, more of our societal systems and upstream systems to help ensure and promote safety? So in the world of traffic safety, that would be, again, at those upper rungs, it would be, how do we set speeds at the appropriate safer level? How do we design roads? How do we manufacture vehicles that are safer, et cetera? So those are things that are not individually controlled, right? They really are upstream. Those are things that folks like you all and others, in positions of influence really control. So this is another way of showing that. So at the bottom right, you'll see individual road users. Again, we want to keep saying to folks and educating them, hey, be careful when you're walking, biking, driving, here are the rules of the road. And now looking at the next one on the bottom, road users will make mistakes. Hopefully not a lot, but sometimes they will, whether by choice, consciously or not, but their mistakes will be made. So then we go up to the top and say, hey, how can we really empower? How can we give system planners and policymakers the resources they need, both in terms of policies and funding and design flexibility? That's really important to make the system safer, the roadway safer, the speeds safer, the vehicles safer. Those are all things that are in your control. But with the safe systems approach, we want to really empower and give you even more leeway to do these things so that when those inevitable mistakes happen on the road, they aren't fatal or severe. They're more mild. So part of this is kind of evolving, or I'd say pivoting from the traditional ease approach. You probably all know the ease of engineering, education, enforcement, emergency services. More and more, we've all been adding, I think, equity, engagement, evaluation, very important. We still need all of these E's. So nothing, let me be clear, nothing I'm saying should diminish the importance of their various roles. But sometimes they can feel siloed, right? Oh, that's a police problem, let them handle it. Oh, that's an engineering problem, let them handle it. That's not been working out so well for us to be so siloed, and not by choice. It's just a natural, human instinct. People kind of go into their area and their expertise. Part of what the safe systems approach is doing, in addition to acknowledging the fact that humans make mistakes and planning for that, also looking upstream to those policies and systems changes, design changes. What it's also doing, if we're doing safe systems right, is really helping the E's kind of come together and work more closely together. So if our goal is safe travel, how are we really thinking about safe streets, safe speeds, safe vehicles, safe people? Let me just give an example, or actually, let me keep going, because we will give examples of these. I won't give it right now, but maybe keep that in mind. I just want to highlight this because I'm so excited about it, and I hope everyone on the call will be, and Shemai is going to get into this in more detail, but huge kudos. We have real strong national leadership for this goal of zero. Just back in January, pretty recently, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Buttigieg, specifically, and his team committed to the goal. You can read it here. Our goal is zero deaths, a country where one day nobody has to say goodbye to a loved one because of a traffic crash. And they've released a national roadway safety strategy that really lays out a high-level plan to get there. So this is huge. So not only that map I showed you with the 45 communities, that's huge, that's exciting. We're definitely seeing more states engaging at that zero level. And I know Florida is one that is really working towards that. And now the national level. So this is a first. And again, I won't get into this now, but I'm really excited that Shemai will dig more into the national roadway safety strategy. But again, you'll see on this circle the different areas. So kind of like I was showing, those ideas of engineering and education and enforcement, they fit in different areas here. So thinking about safe road users, yeah, that is educating. And yes, there is an enforcement component, but we also need to think about, say, equity within that. Are we using enforcement equitably? And do safe road users actually have safe choices? And that safe choices goes back to the roads, to the speeds, to the vehicles, right? So how are they all really, really connected? And that plan does a really good job. And again, as Valerie mentioned, not only is this really historic commitment and I'd say really stepped up focus on safety coming from the national or federal level, we're also seeing it come with money. So just a highlight that the Safe Streets for All funding, which Shemai will talk more about, is a huge opportunity for locals, regionals, and tribes to get direct funding for Vision Zero and safe systems planning and implementation. So more on that to come, but I just want to again say that, hey, this stuff we're talking about, it's proven safety measures and approach. It's also going to be better funded very soon. So Get excited about that. And I'm going to talk about just two areas. Again, there's much more to this, but the two areas I'm going to highlight that we know within Vision Zero and the safe system approach are the most impactful. And maybe it's not the right word to use, the most effective. Number one is designing complete streets. So you'll see an image here where, we've got a good mix of users, right? We're not cutting off anyone's mobility. We're not limiting anyone's mobility, but it's really clear. Hey, folks walking have clear dedicated space. Folks biking have clear dedicated space. People driving have clear dedicated space, separation wherever possible, and real visibility and connectivity is very important, but also just really understanding so that people can know what to expect. This is an example, and I'll pick a little bit on my hometown of Jacksonville, Florida. Both these images are from Jacksonville, Florida. And I feel bad that I'm taking on them, but this is right outside my family's home. But you see these kids in the top picture walking to school, and it's great, right? We absolutely want more kids walking to school, right? Great. They're off their devices for a while. They're getting some exercise and fresh air. They're walking in this case, about 3 blocks to a middle school, but there's no sidewalks on either side. And by the way, this might look like a nice little road, but people drive quite fast on it. So I'm showing this to say, hey, you can educate these kids all you want about being safe, but unless they have a safe choice, like a sidewalk to walk on, they don't have a good choice. So really thinking about how designing complete streets is fundamental. Ditto with the person biking here does not have a good choice. So really thinking about how is our engineering, our street design, and our speed management fundamental. Only then can we layer on with any effectiveness things like education. So ditto, the second thing I'll talk about is managing speed for safety. And this is really gaining a lot of ground at the federal level and across the country. We're seeing more and more communities embrace this idea of 20 is plenty. So the idea of 20 miles per hour being your speed limit, at least on your downtown roads, your neighborhood roads. Maybe it's not your big arterials. I get that. It's certainly not, we're not talking about I-95 here, but for your more local roads, places where you have people walking, biking, schools, transit, commercial centers, bringing the speeds down to 20 and designing for that. It's not just about lowering speed limits. Let me be clear. That doesn't do the trick itself, but where you can lower speed limits and then add traffic calming, and again, going backwards, showing these complete streets where you do have dedicated space, but lowering speeds as well. With that crash, not accident, I said, there's one thing I want to really encourage. Here's the second thing I really want to encourage as a takeaway. It's this graphic on the bottom, the chart showing that if an average person, so it's hard to say average, but if somebody like myself is, average health, average build, if I'm hit while walking by an average sized vehicle, not a big vehicle, not a giant vehicle, but I'm hit by an average sized vehicle that's moving at 20 miles per hour, I have an average 10% chance of death. If that vehicle is moving just at 40 miles per hour, that doesn't sound like a lot, right? 40 miles per hour, my chance of death is 90%. That is astronomical. So these ideas of, 5, 10 miles per hour doesn't make a difference. It does. So really thinking about if we're expecting and encouraging more people walking and biking, and again, I'm talking about areas where we know we have a mix of users, we should be setting our speeds and designing our streets for speeds that are survivable. It's just a matter of physics. We know this, and we know we can change it. I mentioned equity earlier, and I just want to highlight it again because it's so important. And again, something that the federal level and many of us are focusing on more and more. But these are national statistics, and there are more updated numbers I want to share. But overall, we're seeing that nationally, people in low-income communities are twice as likely to be killed while walking. People of color, African American and Latino specifically, people of color are twice as likely to be killed while walking than white people. And then we know that communities that are higher income are more likely to have safety amenities. So I could show this, the sidewalks you see 90% versus about 50%. This is the same for bikeways. We also know that more dangerous roads, high speed, fast, very, very, heavy traffic arterials, freeway touchdowns, those are more likely nationally, more likely to be in low income communities and communities of color. It's because, frankly, that's the way we've built our environments. You can look back many, many, many decades and generations to see that, many, many decisions in the past have really led us to what are inequitable and unjust safety outcomes today. So really think about how do we address that. And I'm just going to give a preview because they're doing really great work in many places. But we're going to hear, after a few more speakers, we're going to hear from a fantastic Vision Zero leader in Hillsborough County. This is the Tampa, Florida area, so not far from you guys, but we'll hear about their Vision Zero plan. But you'll really see, we're going to talk about how they really lay out long-term actions, timelines, who's the lead on the project, what are the resources they'll need funding-wise, who's going to support it. And I'm saying this to really emphasize, well, A, to give you a little taste of what's to come, but B, to say, Vision Zero, again, is not just a slogan. It's not just saying, oh, yeah, we'll have complete streets. Oh, sure, we'll lower speeds. It's actually doing it, right? It's developing a plan. It's laying out not just the goals, but the actions within. It's laying out who's responsible. It's laying out a timeline so that there is shared commitment, so that there is political buy-in, so that there is public accountability and transparency as well. And you'll hear a little bit about one of Hillsborough County's focus areas, which is managing speed, which I was just talking about. They did a whole plan around speed management, which is really impressive. We'll talk about that. And just a few examples. This is actually from Hillsborough's plan, but to highlight what huge changes we're seeing. We're seeing speed limits be reduced. Again, like I mentioned, some places from 30 to 25, some places from 25 to 20, again, on smaller roads, places like Seattle, Boston, and across the country. You'll see a long list there. And Charlotte, North Carolina, similarly, they're also lowering speeds, and we'll hear about that. They're designing more traffic calming, like speed humps, to slow people down. So these aren't just theories, right? These aren't just ideas of, hey, if you do these things, they're happening, and they're seeing results. So a little bit more about Charlotte's focus, everything from focusing on pedestrian and bike projects to street lighting, a huge opportunity and funding coming that could be used for that. Other cities that I think are really relatable, places, smaller communities like Macon, Georgia. They are a Vision Zero community that really is committing. I love this image where they went out, let me emphasize, they went out and did pilots or trials where you can see volunteers working with the city, but volunteers went out and built out a sample bike network. And it was temporary paint, but I think it lasted a few days. And they tested out, okay, how does this work? How does that work? How do people feel? And they tested out their bike network. And just want to flag that in some of this funding coming that we keep referring to, you would have the opportunity to do pilots and test things out and figure out, does this work or does that work? And I really like, oops, sorry, this is a little bit of a funky image, but I really appreciate this is a quote from the St. Petersburg. So again, not far from you guys, but a complete streets plan and a quote from the St. Pete mayor. So you'll see I highlighted a part, but coming back to speeding, we know that everyone worries about speeding. We know that about 1/3, roughly nationally, about 1/3 of traffic deaths have speeding as a cause, maybe along with other causes. I think that's an undercount based on other things, but let's say at least 1/3. But it's not just speeding as a problem. And I'm going to read the highlighted part that the mayor says. This is because, furthermore, drivers who drive too fast cannot bear the full blame. This is because that's how engineers, planners, and city leaders have here and in other cities have designed roads for decades. We invite people to drive too fast. That's not meant to be a finger wagging or a criticism, but coming back to this idea of a systems approach. We design roads, we set speeds, we design vehicles literally in ways that have vastly increased speeds and are causing more deaths and more injuries. We have control over that. We can redesign streets. We can change speeds. We can redesign vehicles so that lower speeds are encouraged, and that will save lives. So I really appreciate that that St. Pete mayor was really clear about saying that. And again, I reinforce this. Vision Zero is not a slogan. It really is a paradigm shift. So thinking about when you're planning, how are you really looking deeply at your data? We didn't talk much about that, but looking at your data and really thinking about what are the upstream solutions for change. I am going to wind down now. I know we covered a lot, but I wanted to leave my contact information here. We'd love you to go to our website. All our information is available and free there. Again, we have webinar recordings. You can do a whole Vision Zero 101. We have a Vision Zero 201. We have resources for how to develop an action plan. We have resources about equity and speed management, all the things I touched on in much more detail. But with that, I will say thank you for this opportunity. And I'd love to take questions and go any deeper and see if there's anything you guys want to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. So we do have a Q&A portion of this. We currently have no questions, but if any attendees have any questions, please feel free to write them in the Q&A. I'll just give 1 minute in case anyone has any questions, and if not, we will move on to the next part, and feel free to put Q&As during the rest of the presentations as well. All right, not seeing any questions. So, but if you guys do have any questions, we can always go back to them and get them to Leah to send after. And next we have Shamai presenting next.
Hello, I'm Shamai and I have a problem turning on my camera. I could unmute, but I can't turn on the camera. Great.
There you go.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Cassidy. Thank you, Valerie, and the TPA team for inviting me to talk about SET system from the Federal Highway perspective. I have a privilege working with Valerie and with Leah Shaham from the Vision Zero Network in the past, and I have to say that I admire this lady's energy and passion and resilience to make Vision Zero work. So thank you for your leadership. So I will be talking about the SET system approach, a little overview of that and implementation opportunities, as Valerie and Leah mentioned earlier about funding opportunity. Everything will be still at the high level because of the time issue. But on June 29, we will have a webinar dedicated to visions, to a SET system. And we will have a longer presentation, which is about 30 minutes, and that will be followed by examples from the city of Fremont, California. So I don't have access to the chat room, but I will ask Cassidy or someone from the TPA to share the link to the registration of the webinar, which is going to be on June 29th. So the SET system approach. So you heard from Leah already the reasons why we need a vision or a goal of zero deaths, and the advancement of the SET system approach to reach zero. So you know, it's so unattainable, but it's very aspirational. And just imagine the day when no single person is killed on our roadways. And you know, imagining that and putting it to action would take a lot of work and will take a lot of changes. So there are a lot of changes to be made for that. We need to perceive and address safety differently, like what Leah said about Vision Zero. It's not a tagline or a program, but it's the different way of doing business. So rather than accepting death and serious injuries as a price for mobility, the SET system approach actually is founded upon the ethical imperative that no one should be killed or seriously injured when they're using the road system, you know, our road system in the US, regardless of what they are, who they are, what modes of transportation they're using, and that socioeconomic background and their ability. So we want a system to be designed safely for everyone. And so what is SET system? SET system aims to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries. It's different from the traditional approach when we wanted to eliminate or reduce crashes. So at the center of the SET system approach is actually human beings. And humans are vulnerable, as you all know. We all know we have just one body, and we can only sustain forces to a certain degree. So this approach is human-centered and is accommodate human mistakes by design a roadway system that are forgiving and acknowledge human mistakes. So if the mistakes are happening and create a crash, or the design of the road system fails to prevent a crash, at least we design in the way that it keeps the crash impact that transfer to human body to some kind of tolerable levels for the body. So furthermore, the system is protecting not only the people who are visible, but the people who are not. We're talking about the people who usually are not vocal, who live in the area where it's underserved. Equity is coming in mind, and as you heard from Leah about this, it sounds abstract at this point, but when you think about examples like you encounter on a daily basis, or even every now and then, let's take a look at a countermeasure like rumble strips, for example, and it's more in the rural area than one urban area, but it's a great example I wanted to share with you. So what is the purpose of rumble strips? They are road drivers when they unintentionally leave the roadways, right? So we design and we installed rumble strips with expectation that human would make mistakes, and the countermeasure would help correct the mistakes and bring people back to the roadways. And regarding keeping impacts on human body at tolerable level, we can look at speed. And you heard from Leah early on. It's a good example. It's very crucial in the safe system approach because it has a direct relation to our body ability to sustain the crash force. So when the crash occurs, lower speed is more preferable, as I said, than a higher speed. So the keys is to design, operate a system through the management of kinetic energy, which is the energy that potentially transfer from the crash to human body when a crash occurs. Safe system is not new, at least in the concept, and countries around the world, like those in Europe, like the Netherlands, Sweden, and Australia and New Zealand. In Australia are using the safe system approach and have been successful in reducing the fatalities and serious injuries across the board. So in the US, it seems like it's a new terminology, but it has been used. So you heard from Leah through the Vision Zero work, and then also through other national level initiatives like the Towards Zero Deaths and the Road to Zero. And these are separate initiatives, but they aim to bring the fatalities and serious injuries down to zero. So safe system, let's take a look in the safe system approach a little more closely. Again, for the interest of time, I will not go through each of them, but I like to bring up the 6 principles and the 5 elements. So the approach is actually driven by the principles, and they work for the 5 elements. And you can see on the slide here, the principles are on the outer ring of the wheel, and the elements are on each of the slides of the pizza right here. So the 6 principles, as you heard already, death and serious injuries is unacceptable. We like to look at crashes as well. Crash is not desirable, but we wanted to focus on those crashes that result in death and serious injuries. Humans make mistakes. I mentioned that earlier, that it's inevitable. We do make mistakes. So we had to make sure we design a system that accommodates the mistakes, and we are vulnerable, as I mentioned earlier. But the next 3 principles, I'd like to talk a little bit more about them. Responsibility is shared. We as system designer, we around the table here, or the virtual table, we are planners, engineers, or a city council, and so on. We are responsible for making the roads safer, but we are working with other sectors. For example, the car manufacturers, the enforcement personnel, or the post-crash care personnel, and even the users, the bicyclists, the drivers, and so on, to make sure that we demonstrate safe behavior when we take on the road, and also to keep the road safe for everyone. So we share the responsibility, not just the use as a user, but as a system manager as well. And safety is proactive. We don't want to wait until crash occurred to improve the roadways. We wanted to use the data, historic data, but we want to use it in a proactive way so that we can identify and mitigate the risk systematically. Redundancy is crucial. So what does it mean? So we do this, we wanted to have everything strengthened, so that when one part fails, the other part can still protect the road users. And sometimes the parts are elements as well that I will mention later on, and they together they make a safe system. And so these are the 5 elements. And Leah mentioned a little bit about them earlier. The safe road users, that's all of us. Safe vehicles. We want to make sure the vehicles are not only safer for the people who are in or on the vehicles, but we want a safer for the people outside of vehicles in case of crash occurring. Safe speeds, as you heard earlier, that we emphasize, we cannot emphasize enough about safe speeds, as it has direct relationship to our ability to tolerate crash. Safe roads is pretty important for us, right? I mean, with NPOs and federal highway as well, and because safe roads and actually safe speeds are what we focus on. But safe roads, we want to design roads that accommodate human mistakes. I cannot emphasize that enough. But then we want the road to be forgiving when a crash occurs. Post-crash care include emergency management and the traffic incident management as well. And it's the last line of defense. So if all else fails, if we don't have safe road users, or if we don't have safe speeds, so we rely on post-crash care to protect human beings, to protect the road users. That's other things that we should consider in the safe system approach. Equity, as you heard earlier, we all had to agree that if we want to wipe out fierce injuries and fatalities, we had to make sure that we bring safety to everyone, the vulnerable people, and not only in terms of physical vulnerability, but it's in terms of socioeconomic as well. And people who live in the area with historically underserved and disinvested, sometimes by policies from the government, even though the government is not doing that intentionally, but we had transportation policy or housing or land use policy in the past that actually were hurtful to these communities. It's not accident, it's a crash. It's kind of like along the same line of what Leah showed earlier. And we should have this mentality in mind. It brings out the positive safety culture, which is very important to support the safe system approach. So, so having a safety culture helps advance a safe system approach, but conversely, when we implement a safe system approach, we actually grow a safety culture. So I want to show this slide because it's a great analogy to the redundancy principle that I talked earlier. So we have redundancy as one of the principles, and we have 5 elements, and they work together to create a safe system. and they create redundancy as well. So each Swiss cheese slice here represents an element, and the holes represent the weakness. So when you line them up and you put them together, and when the holes don't line up, so at least we are protected. The human beings or the road user are protected. Whereas when you look at the graphic on the right-hand side, the holes light up, all the weakness light up. So this is when the human being exposed and not protected by any of the layer. It's an analogy that we like to use when we describe redundancy in the safe system approach, and it's pretty effective. So in some, I just want to bring up this table. It's a little bit like it's overlap with Leah's table earlier on. This one is the comparison between the traditional approach and the safe system approach. So in the past, we tried to prevent crashes, but the new approach, we are seeking to prevent death and serious injuries. Although we all crashes matter. In addition to improving human behaviors, we, under the safe system approach, we want to design a system that accommodates human mistakes and acknowledge and accommodate human mistakes and limitations. And instead of controlling speeding, under the safe system, we are trying to reduce kinetic energy, as I said earlier, that potentially being transferred from the crash impact to human body. Whereas we, in the past, blame victims or even the person who caused a crash and hold them accountable, responsible for their action. Under the safe system lens, we seek to share responsibility among users, among road designers and road managers and road owners. Lastly, instead of using data just to reactively, just to use it as the reason for improving roadways, we use the data proactively and identify and mitigate risk. Implementation-wise, there are plenty of opportunities, plenty of ways to implement the safe system approach. We could do it through policy, through the planning process, through design. And actually, one thing that I did not put on the screen is we could even do it through the change in our organizational structure or culture. So these are the different ways, and usually planning is very important, because if you don't start in the planning process, I mean, when you get to the project level, the design to construction, it will be a little harder. So policy and planning is always the first place to start. And as Leah mentioned earlier, about the National Roadway Safety Strategy that the U.S. Department of Transportation released in January. This is very exciting news. This strategy, I call it for short, is NRSS. It's outlined the department's approach to significantly reduce serious injuries and reduce deaths. And it's represent an approach that we need to work with our stakeholders across the country to achieve the shared safety goal, which is 0. And two things that I want to emphasize is that the department actually adopted the vision of 0 deaths and the integration of the safe system approach in everything that we do, so that we can bring the save lives and bring the fatalities and serious injuries to 0. And when the secretary launched it in NRSS, and you saw the picture in Leah's presentation, they actually called out communities that embrace changes to save lives. And the two communities he mentioned were Fremont, California, and Hoboken in New Jersey, and they both communities that committed to zero. So that is very exciting to hear. Other actions that were outlined in the strategy are, I mean, they're plenty, but I want to bring a couple to your attention. One of them is to identify new priority actions and notable changes to existing actions. Another one is the fact that we can leverage new funding and policy from the bipartisan infrastructure law, as Leah mentioned earlier. I'm going to go over that a little bit. And advances equity and climate goals and calls others, mostly our stakeholders and partners, to action. So this is the first step of trying to reach the goal of zeros, as the secretary said earlier, even before the launching of the strategy, that this is a crisis. The increase in deaths on our roadways is actually a crisis. And in terms, on the perspective of public health, it's really a pandemic. And I have a little problem controlling. So is there a way I can go back? I don't have the arrows anymore. Amanda, could you go back? Yeah, great. Thank you. Great, right there. Thank you. So this is the funding opportunity that Leah mentioned earlier. So it's a discretionary grant program from the recent bill infrastructure. I mean, the what I call it, partisan infrastructure law, which code for short is bill. So this is a Safe Street and Roads for All, a discretionary grant program, and $5 billion over the next 5 years. And the focus is on preventing roadway deaths and injuries, but particularly to the local governments, MPOs, counties, cities, townships, and any special districts that are subdivisions of states and transit agency as well. The federally recognized tribal governments as well as multi-jurisdictional groups comprised of these entities are eligible to apply for the grant. So there are two grant types available, planning and implementation. The planning is for designing, creating, and updating of the comprehensive safety action plan. And the implementation grant, which is 60% of the funding, will be for planning, design, and development activities in support of the action plan, or to carry out, and actually not for, and to carry out projects and strategies that identified under the action plan. So the notice for funding opportunities is coming out soon, actually sooner than we thought. So please keep an eye out for that. We in the past, the department, not in the past, in the past 2 weeks, actually put together informational webinars for NPOs and for cities and for tribes, and they are recorded. And for more information on that and other things related to this grant, you can visit the website. So can you move to the next slide, please? So I just want to stop here with the offering of technical resources. We have outreach materials, as well as all the materials that we developed for agency to help agency to start implementing safe system. And also we have the webinar that's coming up on the 29th, and I will share with Cassidy or Valerie the registration website for that. Thank you very much for your attention and for your interest in SEP system, and I hope I did not go over my time.
Thank you, Shamai. We do have a question. It is from Joanna. It's a little long, so bear with me.
Sure.
I am interested in learning more about post-acute care as part of the system approach, the SAFE system approach. This is a multiple part question. What investments locally, regionally, or nationally are there to support post-crash care? And does it include just investments in the post-crash care providers, police, fire, etc., or are there investments to help the individuals post-crash? Also, are hospitals a part of the post-crash care partners?
Thank you for the question. We are at Federal Highway. We are working with agencies overseeing post-crash care programs like NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the agency that is dealing with EMS. And so the scope of that is actually outside of Federal Highway. So I'd be happy to bring that question to those individuals, or those entities, and have answer for you. Thank you. Cassidy, you are on mute.
Great, and we can follow up with her.
Yes, definitely.
And those are all the questions we have right now. Everyone can feel free to keep asking questions. Thank you, Shamai. And now I'm going to pass it back to Leah, along with Gina Torres and Angela Berry.
Great. Thanks, Cassidy. And let me say first, huge thanks to Shamai. There are a lot of super hardworking, dedicated people I know throughout the country, particularly at US Department of Transportation right now, working to really move this policy into action with the funding and really make sure that the money gets down and the safety policies really do get shared at the local and regional and state levels. And Shamai is at the very front of that awesome, hardworking train of people. So huge thanks to her. Great. All right. So I'm really excited. We are going to have a discussion now. We're done with the slides for a little while, and we're actually just going to talk, some talking heads here, but some amazing talking heads. I'm really excited to be sitting virtually. I wish it were in person, but sitting virtually with two women I admire in this movement very much, folks I've been working with for years now and are doing fantastic work on the ground. We thought it'd be fun to really talk about what does Vision Zero and the Safe Systems approach look like on the ground, knowing it's not always perfect, it's not always fast and easy, but it is a process, and it takes leaders like the folks you're going to hear from today. So let me introduce first, Gina Torres is the Assistant Director at Plan Hillsborough, which is the transportation planning organization for Hillsborough County in Florida, which includes Tampa, an area I love. So hi, Gina, thank you for joining. Mm-hmm. And she's really been one of the Vision Zero leaders there in so many ways. And then also we are thrilled to be joined by Angela Berry, who is leading Vision Zero and is the Traffic Safety Program Manager with the City of Charlotte's Department of Transportation. Hey, Angela, thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
And again, this is something where I think, definitely, I want to say, please do, I encourage you to go to their sites. Maybe we'll share those at the end so you can learn more. I know I shared a few photos in my presentation, for instance, of Charlotte's action plan, of Hillsborough County's action plan. So there's a lot more than we're going to be able to cover. But I wanted to talk with you all, Gina and Angela, a little bit more about your experiences, because I think a lot of people on the call, they may fill roles like yours. They may be a transportation planner or a policy maker. Maybe they're, a concerned resident, which I know you both are too, in your communities. But kind of talk about, how do we go from this great idea? Sure, who doesn't want safety for all, right? Of course we do. Everyone generally agrees with that. How do we go from that good idea to really taking some action steps? So I'm going to start maybe just on a kind of maybe more personal level, whether personal or professional. I'll start with you, Gina, and then Angela. Kind of how and when did you first get involved with Vision Zero? What did that look like for you?
I remember exactly when it happened, honestly. I had gone to the Fort Lauderdale Safe Streets Summit, and it was around, I want to say 2015. And I sat in the audience not knowing what I was going to hear. And there was a presentation by a New York City DOT commissioner. It wasn't Jeanette Sadek. I think it was one of her employees or staff. And he told a story of a little boy, and I get the chills now, but who was grabbed, from his sister's hand by a city truck, and killed. And then after that was Melissa Wandel spoke about her husband so lovingly. And I, right then and there, I was already involved in safety planning, I thought, until I learned so much more about what we could be doing, and that I was actually had the opportunity to influence a survivor or the life of my neighbors and my family. So that's how I got involved.
So I'm not quite as precise. I don't think I know the exact moment. I was promoted to the traffic safety program manager in 2014 or 2015. You'd think I could remember these things. And as soon as I got into this position, I started interacting with folks from other aspects of our community that deal with public health. So Mecklenburg County Public Health, our hospital is a level 1 trauma center, the injury prevention director there. And they kept asking me, when are we going to be Vision Zero? When are we going to be Vision Zero? And I kept saying, well, A, let me learn what Vision Zero means. And B, I have no idea, but I think it's a good thing we do it. And especially in that first year, so it was maybe my third year in the position, our fatalities spiked from 54 to 71 from one year to the next. And my staff investigates all those fatal crash reports and does a field visit, recommends potential engineering improvements if there are any that we can make. But what I came to realize in reviewing all of those with my staff is that this health crisis is so much deeper than just making an engineering change. It's literally going to take all of us in our community to make our streets safer. And so in 2017, our city manager heard about the spike. And in the beginning of 2018, he said, "Thou shalt go forth and develop an action plan, and I want it in 6 months." And we said, okie dokie. So a bunch of us buckled down, didn't get the opportunity to hire a consultant, and developed our task force, which has continued to grow, involves all those people from my original conversations plus so much more, and adopted our Vision Zero action plan at early 2019. So coming up just on 3 years of work in the plan and making strides. As Leah said, nothing is ever as fast as we want it to be. And unfortunately, I'm still reading fatal crashes. The words I use are they make poor choices, right? So even with a road design that seems safe, when someone chooses to speed and not wear their seatbelt and perhaps add impairment to the factors, those are really hard things to engineer away. And so have learned how broadly encompassing this is. And I heard the question someone asked about the aftercare, right? The emergency response component to a safe systems approach. And so we have made sure to include our hospital staff, both hospitals, as well as medic, the fire department, all of those folks sit on our Vision Zero task force so that we hear their perspective as well as just Angela's engineering perspective on how we could do things differently from a road design perspective.
Thanks, Angela.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and Gina, I'd love to ask you a little bit about your process, maybe not in a technical way, but to move, when you went home from that event, to kind of help others on your team and at other agencies, and of course, your policymakers, right? The people who are actually kind of putting their elected reputations on the line. How did you move from a non-Vision Zero approach to a Vision Zero approach? And what kind of maybe questions or skepticism did you bump up against? And how do you get through that? I think that's probably for a lot of people on the call, they may be at that stage.
Totally. Actually, the wind was attempted to be taken out of my sail immediately because our city, we wanted to ask our city to take this on because the city can implement changes and direct their agencies and departments to think about Vision Zero. And our mayor said, oh, no, we're not doing this at the time. Our new mayor is definitely loving and embracing. So that was the first, kickback. So we realized that maybe we need to talk a little bit to our elected officials about what this is and why it's so important. Like, let's back up a little. Even though they understood that we were leading the country in deaths, by the way, we had 257 in Hillsborough County last year. So it's not a race that I'm proud of saying, but your deaths are horrible. But I can't get over that we have 257 people died last year. Anyway, so we brought in national speakers to come to our boards, and our TPO board is, county commissioners and city council and mayors and the heads of other transportation agencies. And we spent a little bit of money to bring a national speaker in. Then they had developed some PowerPoints so that we could go out to the community and start talking about what this is. And then we committed to a pretty healthy budget to develop our action plan. And since then, it led to the things that Leah had pointed out, our speed management action plan. And I'm really happy that a lot of these plans, which are long-range plans, are being implemented now. Like, that is unusual in TPO 20-year planning horizons. So, I don't want to jump the gun too much in what other questions Leah is going to ask, but we definitely have some really good projects on the ground and ways to move those forward. And we'll talk maybe a little bit about how to fund those and what the challenges are for that. But we seem to have gotten more understanding in our community after using the help of professionals, honestly, because they saw me I've been around for a while, and for 25 years, it's been longer, but, saying, oh, we need bike lanes, we need sidewalks. And it's not just that. And having someone else carry that torch and talk about it a little bit was helpful for our community to welcome the idea of Vision Zero and how we start to implement it.
Yeah. I want to say kudos. You guys really were on the leading end. I know it just, feels so slow to all of us, and it always is too slow if there's still deaths. But, first of all, thanks to you both for being, going out there early and helping figure things out, and now taking time to share with others. So Angela, maybe help me understand a little bit about, you guys did your plan pretty quickly, relatively speaking. There's no perfect way. I don't want to say it's good or bad, but you did do your plan pretty quickly because it sounded like there was some political impetus there, which is great, right? You want to seize on that. Let's be honest. Tell me a little bit about how it's helped, or has it helped to have a plan, and what has it changed? Because I think a lot of times, we all have plans. You referred to this, Gina, like everybody's got a plan, but to see things come out of it. What does it mean to have a Vision Zero action plan? And I'm going to emphasize action. And maybe what tips would you have for somebody if you were to do it over, do it differently? Again, thinking people on the call may be thinking about doing an action plan themselves.
So we definitely capitalized on the political impetus of our city manager, and did have to do some education and persuading amongst our city council members that this was something we needed to do, and needed to do in a thoughtful way. I will say that developing the action plan in 6 months meant that we were, I don't want to say vague, but we were a little squishy on the details, right? Of what specific measurable actions we were going to do. And that was on purpose so that the document can evolve and change as technologies come on board, as we meet new people, right? Like I'm meeting Gina today for the first time, even though we talked on the phone the other day. You know, as you meet new people and new influencers in this space, you may walk away with something that was never in your action plan, but just shines like this great idea that you should take advantage of. And so you divert a little bit from the action that was in the action plan to take, you know, capitalize on this opportunity that showed up that you weren't expecting. And I don't want to dig too deep into it. Leah knows about it, but we have a video that we developed for training all of our police officers on drivers who need evaluation for mobility issues. And so we happened to meet a speaker, and she agreed to make a video for us, and all our police officers are required to watch it now, so that they know how to submit for a real what's the occupational therapist evaluation of a driver's abilities, not just the driving test, right? Because a 55-year-old driver is going to pass the driving test. They know their signs, they know when to stop. But it's taking advantage of looking at those potential physical and cognitive disabilities that may be kicking in, and having them really evaluated by an occupational therapist. And I lost my train of thought. There was a second part to the question.
What would you do differently, maybe? I cannot wait to respond to some of the things.
Y'all go for it.
What would I do differently? It was hard to do an action plan in-house and try to balance all the other duties all of us had. It's really hard to step away and say, I need to spend 8 hours today doing this, and ignore the safety committee that we had that meets monthly, ignore the pedestrian safety program that I manage and the projects I needed to be supervising there. So we called it the A-Team Roadshow. It was Amy, Angela, and Alex, and we were the A-Team Roadshow that sold Vision Zero to everybody and anybody we could think of. For about 2 months, we actually discussed the fact that our husbands rarely saw us during the week, because in the evenings we were always at public engagement events talking to our citizens about what they wanted to see in the action plan. And it's just been, if I had to do it differently, like 2 more months would have just been so bonus to have by doing it with all in-house staff. But I mean, everybody pitched in, from our GIS analysts to our deputy director. It was a great collaboration, and the task force, I think it's the first of its kind that we've ever had in the city of Charlotte that is so all-encompassing. And so that's been really interesting as well. The police have kept us really grounded. We had a vision statement that was full of jargon and buzzwords, and my sergeant from the major crash unit, we read the statement up on the PowerPoint in a big room with all of us, and he held his hand up and he said, "You lost me after the third word." He said, "I tuned it out." He said, "Let's take it simple." And so 40 of us in a room wordsmithed in real time our very simple, straightforward vision statement, which is, which I should have memorized, and I do not, but it's on the front of our website. So please do visit it. We took out all the buzzwords, all the jargon, data-driven, blah, blah. Yeah, all those things are applicable and they drive what I do every day. But, your everyday citizen isn't concerned with that. And then the other thing I wanted to share was that we did make a change across the department in that all of our projects now, so we've always been a sidewalk focused city and bike program focused city, but we took all of our projects now use safety data to prioritize which ones are the most important. So they use our high injury network to prioritize their projects in every program that we have.
Nice. Leah, can I just jump in? I don't know if you want to prompt me, but I really have some things about our action plan, which is a little different. We had a lot of time to prepare it. I mean, I've relatively compared to yours and a lot of people helping. But we had some specific actions, which I thought were really good to have in there so that we can really track our performance and kind of give people, professionals and citizens, an idea of what they can do. So I thought it's really useful. It became even clearer after doing our speed management action plan that we needed to say something specific. And even more so this last year when our crashes have just skyrocketed. So we asked our board to ask their staff to show us by the end of this year, how are they going to reduce speeds from 5 to 10 miles an hour on the 50 high injury network, reporting back in a summit at the end of the year. We also asked for support, which it didn't pass, of the automated speed enforcement around schools. That was it was aggressive for Florida to have seen even that coming forward. And I hope it will continue to be presented as an option. And just some other things that we were asking for really direct action to be taken. And I think that because of our Vision Zero action plan, we were able to point to that and say, this is the stuff that we find important. We have in our long range transportation plan, which I guess we kind of hold the purse strings for a lot of funds as a TPO. I mean, there's other funding out there, but we include Vision Zero as a category or a bucket of funding. And then when the TIP, I'm doing what your law enforcement hated, but the Transportation Improvement Program, which is the first 5 years of the long range plan, it specifically prioritizes Vision Zero projects that are submitted to us based on, actually, we want construction first. So if you want a planning study, that's great. But we've done so many plans, let's build first. The second category of prioritization is how many how many severe crashes have happened on this corridor. And then we use equity as kind of a tiebreaker. Is it in a community that's traditionally underserved? So the Vision Zero is really being implemented, at least at the MPO level. And well, now our city of Tampa has a plan too. So we're seeing a lot of changes happening there. And I hate to keep talking, but I could talk about this a long time, but I think we may get to this and I can wait. But I think one of your questions to prompt us is what we need to do more to advance Vision Zero. And if I can just mention, we talk about dollars and needing money, but some of this stuff, these quick fixes have really great benefits, like leading pedestrian intervals, or we have painted intersections and crosswalks that we do on our local roads that we can do. Even rectangular rapid flashing beacons in the scope of things are not super expensive, maybe 25,000 compared to 100,000 for, another intersection. And they're really effective. So I think that we can stop thinking that we don't have enough money to do some of these things. And Shemai and the Safe Streets and Roads for All, we have organized a group, even though the NOFO is not out yet. We have a group of county and city and DOT staff who are where the TPO is taking the lead on being the submitter for that grant. And we're organizing with our locals to make sure these are high injury network projects. I have more. I could go on, but I'll put it back to you, Leah.
I do, if you wouldn't mind, go a little bit deeper into the speed management piece. And obviously I emphasized that in my presentation. I know Shemai talked about it. Why is the speed piece so important? And are you all putting more energy or, attention towards it?
Yes.
And can we do that in a systematic way, right? I think a lot of what you guys are referring to, or, I know I think about is, gosh, how are we ever going to have enough staff time and money and energy? That's been the way of thinking in the past, to go address every problem. It's like a whack-a-mole. Remember as a kid, you would play that game, the whack-a-mole, and pop its head up in a different place. How do we kind of get in front of that more and think more upstream? And I'd love to hear your experience.
Well, you went over the crash stats, and, sometimes we were just and I love crash statistics. They're important. And before and after statistics are really important. Oh my gosh, yeah, we did a complete street here and travel times didn't change very much, but the crashes reduced, maybe you're 3 minutes longer. So to me, we looked at the data. We're always looking at the data, but when you go 92% of our roads, severe crashes are 40 miles an hour or greater. 83% are during non-peak, which means the roads are more open and people are speeding. That's what that means. 60% aren't at intersections. Well, that means you've been able to increase your speeds. Everything was pointing to speed. And we already know, through that graphic, that how the likelihood of being injured is so increased. So we got some pushback because people thought that we meant, every road is going to be 20 miles and we hit, 25 miles an hour or 20. It's what's appropriate for that context, which is leading me to context classification. I think the state did a good job at taking a stab at that. We have, our locals have actually even gotten a little bit stricter, because the context classifications allow, do you guys, I'm assuming people know what that is, but if you look at the surrounding community, and is this, an urban, a suburban, or a rural, it might be the same street, but it definitely shouldn't be the same speed through those. And the ranges that are allowed are pretty wide in the DOT's one, but that's fine. We'll just try to get those down lower. But that, to me, is the next step. And this is really important, not to use the 85th percentile in setting speeds anymore. We can't do that. It's just a faulty way of calculating what this road should be by 85th percentile. So I think that's going to be a huge jump in at least allowing local decision makers to feel comfortable, because I think a lot of people that are designing our roads want to do it better and want to, design them so that it makes it hard to speed, because we make mistakes, and if speeding is really easy on a road, you're going to do it. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. If we can have some target speeds, which I hate using those words too, but posting a speed that's most appropriate, then an engineer will do it if they feel like they've got the backing from their, decision makers.
Yep, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And Leah knows how I feel about the 85th percentile. Wah, wah, wah. I cannot stand the 85th percentile methodology, because it encourages speeding. And so that's a continuous fight I have with my state DOT, that the 85th percentile is not the end all and be all. And many of my thoroughfares are state roads. So I actually have been talking with our state safety engineer, who outranks the person who is my stumbling block, and had a great conversation about talking through some of this with him. So excited about that opportunity. And then we actually use US limits too. We actually use 3 models now to set our speed limits, and generally speaking, pick the lowest recommended speed limit of the 3 models. So US limits 2 is from the Federal Highway Administration, in the process of being reworked I'm sitting on the group that is reworking that through the North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. So super excited about that. NCHRP came out with a speed limit setting tool about 3 months ago. I should know the number because my staff is using it, but I don't know the NCHRP number, but I can look it up if someone desperately wants to know what it is. And then we used something that was published in the ITE journal out of Canada, probably a solid 12 to 14 years ago. And we call it the ITE urban model. It came out of Quebec, and it is very land use oriented, much more engineering judgment, does not take into account the 85th or 50th percentile speeds at all. It looks at crash history, land use context, how wide open does the road feel visually. That can make a difference too, right? If you're on a 2-lane road and the houses are set back 50 feet from the edge of the roadway versus a 2-lane road through a downtown district where you have sidewalk with street furniture and trees and businesses, speeds are going to be very different in those two land use contexts. So Gina, you and I could talk about speeding for hours because it is a personal passion of mine as well.
And why don't you have to encourage people who are on the call or online, please do feel free to type in your questions anytime. We're going to keep going for another probably 5 to 10 minutes. So we definitely have time for your questions before we hand it back over. So we definitely want to be watching those. I just want to read to you guys. We got a bravo and the 85th percentile. So we got some supporters here. For those that don't know the 85th percentile, don't worry about it. We hope you won't have to know in the future, but we'll share some resources after this. I know the TPA will do that. We're going to share some really great documents that are, pretty easy to understand. I'll just mention that there's a great group out there called NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, but that regions can relate to too, I think. But it gives some really good background on more safe and effective ways to set speeds. So we'll share some of that. So we won't get into all the detail here. And we definitely, somebody's asking for those links and some of the ways, Angela, you guys are doing that. So we'd love to share that afterwards. I want to think, because I know not everyone on the call are transportation planners or engineers. I want to respect that. One thing I've been really encouraged by, and both of you have referred to this in your experiences, my sense is that we are engaging more with different sectors. So people in the public health realm, people in the policy making realm, community members. And this isn't to say, I don't want to pretend like Vision Zero, changed, that people didn't care about safety and didn't work together before. Of course they cared about safety. Of course they worked together before. But I think I'm sensing more collaboration, more sense of a shared goal, more sense of like common, responsibilities and strategies versus what has felt a little bit like a siloed approach in the past. Like, again, oh, hey, police, go deal with that. And now we're kind of stepping back and being, well, do they have the tools to deal with that? Maybe we need to be helping, or is this the right way? Should we be doing more? Or maybe this isn't the right strategy anyways. There's a more, I think, kind of in-depth and more honest look. Doesn't mean it's easy and fast. Again, doesn't change everything. I don't want to be a Pollyanna, but I think it's heading in the right way. So maybe, Gina, I'll start with you are you seeing experiences where we're saying, hey, this is not just a quote unquote transportation problem or engineering problem or enforcement problem. What are some ways you're seeing that in your work?
3 examples I'm going to give you. With the health, well, first of all, we have some really cool things we're doing in health with garden steps. We're trying to make it easier for communities, low auto ownership communities, to access good food and do that on foot or bike. So we're doing some work with our local gardens. We have currently a health impact assessment of our complete streets. If we were to do, if our funding passes for our surtax and we could do 350 miles of complete streets, we've identified those, how would it impact the risk to chronic disease? So this is a current project that has just started. I can't wait to see what comes out of that. So we are correlating health directly with complete streets. Another thing was land use. And we realized we had spent a lot of our focus, and rightly so, on engineering and transportation, redesigning roads. But we realized too that we weren't bringing in our land use decision makers or planners. So we held a leadership summit last year or the year before, and we asked the folks there, directors of planning commissions and planning agencies. Oh my gosh, by you popping in there makes me think we're talking too long. Okay.
Oh, you're good. I just have a question sent to me directly that I can ask when you're done.
Okay, great. So we were asking, how can we avoid making these kind of poor land use decisions in the future so we don't have to go back and fix them now? How can we get developers to leverage their investments and start doing more for safety? How can we use other modes besides motor vehicle? Because that's usually how they get assessed. Like, oh, you're going to put this many cars on the road, but how can we bring in the other modes to give them credit for putting in a trail or something? And then, well, anyway, so in avoiding like cul-de-sacs and, let's get some synergy there. So we did some work with land use, and I think that's kind of opened up our relationship with them. And the other thing was messaging. And I think that was a lesson learned for me. I really tried an old-fashioned way. I spent a lot of time developing a speakers bureau to go out to communities, and there's only a handful of communities that really were interested, and we talked to them in the first 6 months. And now what do we do? So I think we could leverage the public messaging and social media, which we'll need a younger planner for that because I don't know how to do all that. But just to shift the culture and build champions for this topic, and get away from the conversation of like, why are you doing this to us? And more like, can we have more of what you're doing? So public messaging, land use, and health was something that we've really started establishing relationships with.
Cassie, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. So the question is, can you talk more about some of the implementation hurdles you are experiencing moving from just a Vision Zero resolution to getting actions implemented? For example, you mentioned automated speed enforcement that appears to be such an effective action, but is not getting political support.
I'll start, and maybe Leah, you might have even more information on that. Okay, well, I remember the last thing first. So this automated speed enforcement, our community traffic safety team they don't talk very much in that group because it's a lot of law enforcement, and they just kind of unless you prod them, but that was something they really liked. They liked that they didn't have to use their resources and their staff time. If we have it, we don't have it. Well, we have some red light running cameras. It's effective in places that have had it. You can graduate the fee for the fines in communities of concern. So maybe that's, that is a little bit of an equity issue that comes up. Like, our worst roads are in these lower income, low auto ownership areas. So it seems like we're profiling again, but they don't profile, and maybe there's a solution there. I don't want to just throw the whole idea out because could be really effective. And like I said, there's some good data from other places that have it. And then implementing, I think that was a question. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. The first part of that, how are we getting to actually moving to implementation? Was that of some of?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It says, can you talk more about some of the implementation hurdles you are experiencing moving from just a Vision Zero resolution to getting actions implemented?
Yeah. I mean, I'll think about, I'll maybe answer that mostly for roadway changes, but we are noticing initially that public works departments were really giving us a little pushback because they were like, we're doing all this stuff, and you're telling us that we're not doing, we're not good or something. And I was like, no, this is great, but we can't stop there, and there's more we can do. So I'm finding that our most success is coming with kind of coattailing on road resurfacing projects, on stormwater improvements. We're really getting more happening as for safety and speed reduction and redesigning for complete streets with already implementing or already funded other types of projects. I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
Angela, do you want to share some? And I'd say, in particular, I think I heard someone say, because I think a lot of folks now are doing resolutions. That's a step. It's an important step. But even thinking from resolution to plan to implementation and I would add here institutionalization, right? That's a piece we haven't touched on yet. And all these things can happen at the same time, of course, but there's going to be fits and starts, but maybe I'll share one thing and then pass it to you, Angela. But the resolution is just a start, right? That's good. That's good intention. It's good attention. It's attention and intention, but it's not action. It's not change. So maybe Angela, help us think more about the change pieces, especially to think how are we starting to institutionalize so that it is really in all the work you're doing.
Yep. And so that was really part of what the A team did. So Alex, Angela, and Amy went to all the CDOT divisions. So our land development group, our design and planning section, we went to their staff meetings and explained what we were working on and what the intent was. And there isn't one person in our department now who doesn't know what Vision Zero is, at least in the government center. Now, if I were to go out to field staff, probably a whole different story because they make up 3/4 of our staff. But I know my operations guys know. And again, very similar to Gina, thinking through the opportunities, leveraging resurfacing projects, leveraging a sidewalk project that's going in. And if we just built, like we had a sidewalk project that if we could just build another 1/4 mile, we'd complete an entire network. And so making the case that last 1/4 mile could make such a difference to a big part of our community. And they're advocating for it now, right? My design section engineers are advocating like, yeah, that's right. We're going to build that last 1/4 mile. And we know it's going to bust the budget, but we'll figure out how to pay for it. So super excited about those leveraging opportunities. And I'm with you, Gina. I would love automated speed enforcement. It's starting to get some attention here in North Carolina. I think I've got some of our city council people elevating it to our lobbyists. So we have to have special permission from the state to do it. I'd be happy, just like you would, to start small in school zones, right? And, protect our most vulnerable road users. The other thing I would love to see, and Leah and I have talked about this, is a change from our automobile manufacturers. I mean, if you see a Chevy Suburban nowadays, that thing is a tank. And if you tangle with that as a pedestrian, you are not coming out on the good side of the equation in any way, shape, or form. And yet every commercial is about faster, bigger, stronger cars and automobiles. So so many things that encompass this challenge that you could, it can almost make your head spin because you can't tackle all of it and you want to so desperately.
Well, I wanted to, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure I make this point that it's not nirvana here. I mean, we are still seeing some projects coming through that you're like, why aren't you doing? I mean, we're getting little wins here and there, and we're getting things that we like to see, and we haven't solved it. This is not a Vision Zero heaven, unfortunately, So I just don't want people to be discouraged that it's too big of it's a little piece at a time.
I'll maybe wind down with this. I know, Cassie, we're going to pass it back to you, but I'll wind down to say, kind of in response to that last question and to the fact that it can be overwhelming, right? Because there are so many components. I'll say this, I'm really encouraged we're not necessarily doing a lot better on the ground yet, but the steps are being put in place. And that starts, let's be honest, with like acknowledging there's a problem, and not to sound too hokey, but it's true, right? At the federal level, at your regional levels, at your local levels, people are pausing and saying, wait a minute, this is not okay. That's important, right? And now to say, okay, we're going to do things differently. And then to go, oh, wow, there's a lot of people, and this is again, not new, but we've got more people coming together to say, we've got to do things differently. And to really say, okay, how do you move from that resolution and that intent? It is folks on this call. It's wherever you are in your agency or from outside even, to be saying, okay, let's use the tools that the models that Charlotte and Hillsborough County and 50 other places now have of developing an action plan and making sure that there's real clear actions and timelines and accountability and measurability. Those things are critical. That's the next step after resolution. And I just want to highlight, part of that is using your data to develop a high injury network and then to report on that. How much of that high injury network are you touching, and by touching, I mean improving every single year? How are you quickening that pace? And I'll just wind down by saying, in the past, or even currently, a big barrier has been money. Don't let money be the barrier, because there's never been more transportation and more safety transportation in the United States available than right now and coming. So I know we're going to follow up with a bunch of links that we referred to, but one of those will be how to get on a mailing list to make sure you are hearing about this new safety money. And Florida will be in line for more, I don't want to say more than its fair share, but because Florida sadly has such a high, I want to emphasize high ped bike particularly, and overall traffic death number, you all are going to be getting more money for safety. So I just want to say, really be ready to think big, to think proactively, and we'll share a lot about how to actually learn from Angela and Gina's great models here. So thank you, Angela and Gina, for taking your time. We really appreciate it. We'll hand it back to you, Cassidy.
Thank you all so much. That was great. Now we are going to pass it on to Andrew for the next presentation. One second, we're gonna get it back up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Euler. It's been great discussion so far. I really appreciate you all taking the time in the afternoon to join us here today. I'm just going to have a brief presentation, just a few slides about what you can do here in Palm Beach County and some of the resources that we have available. And a lot of these were already touched on. So it'll be a pretty quick one. So I'll really just go through some of the crash data and mapping resources, Vision Zero action plans and what you can do there, and then some funding resources here in Palm Beach County. And then we can round it out with next steps. And so the first one I wanted to mention is really crash resources. So there's a lot of great tools that have been getting better every year. And I'm listing the main ones here on the screen that I wanted to go through for you all. And then I'll have some examples for you after this slide. But the official record keeper is the Florida Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. They do have a dashboard available on their website, and they're where these other resources come from. But the two ones I wanted to focus more on are out of UF. It's called Signal 4 Analytics, and then FDOT State Safety Office. So these two have good, easy to use tools that you can go into today to be able to really start pulling things and visualizing crashes and issues in your area. A few other things I want to mention too is that if you are a person who works in the industry, you are in a public sector, you're able to get access to the crash reports if you on UF, Signal 4 Analytics. And so you can go in there, and we pull those as well. And we provide quarterly crash report summaries to our committees. So we use that pretty often here at the TPA. They also have a great dashboard, which is easy to use, that we recommend for others to use. And they have some good mapping applications as well. And then the next one I'll touch on is the State Safety Office. Not only do they have their own dashboard mapping application, but they also provide a lot of great resources when it comes to complete streets and other safety resources out there. And then I wanted to mention that these are actually are going to start integrating more with their crash data in late 2022. So you'll be seeing the same data in both sources. But what I really wanted to focus on this high level was Signal 4. And here's just the version for Palm Beach County filtered for 2022. And really this is available to everyone today on that website for Signal 4 on their dashboard. So you don't have to have a login for this. And when I'm talking to people in the public, or like when our public relations department is working with news reporters, or if we want to send quick information to communities or anybody else who asks for it, this is usually where we go to provide that. There's a lot of other data dashboards out there, but this was the simplest one for us to quickly provide this to anybody who asks for it. And so on here, you'll see fatalities, serious injuries, and total crashes, and then you'll have information that relates to the high emphasis areas for the state. So when it comes to intersection crashes, lane departures, aging road users, all that information. And if you get a login to this, you'll actually have access to more detailed information where you could zoom into your community and download data and look at data specifically to your community. And that's what this would look like. And so just for an example of me going in a few minutes, you can zoom into your community when you log in and start to see the hotspots. So we had a presentation recently to the village of Wellington, and it's easier for us to go in and just start telling a story with these types of tools. And so I looked at the high emphasis areas and the sort of crashes happening and the percentages for those in Wellington. So you see that they're happening mostly at dark conditions, 22% Asian road users, some of the high intersections that are experiencing these fatal and serious injuries. And then the next source is that FDOT State Safety Office. And you can actually get very similar data to what you see in a Signal 4, but you can go to the Open Data Hub and you can just see the data in real time there when it gets updated every night, right? So this is open. You can use it in your mapping application, whoever you're using for like a local community for GIS. So this is something else that we also pull pretty frequently, and they have tons of other data, not just crash data. They have all their infrastructure data on this website as well. And so with this, we use both Signal 4 and FDOT's data when it came to developing our updated Vision Zero action plan that we just updated this past year. In there, we have our actions that are geared towards policy, funding, and cultural actions. And this is how we set up our action plan here for the county when it comes to being a metropolitan plan organization. So what the TPA can do as our entity towards furthering Vision Zero. Also in there was looking at our high emphasis areas. What are the bigger contributing factors here in our county? And also creating that high injury network that you've heard about a lot about today. And with that high injury network, similar to what you'll see in other places, is a large percentage are happening on a small amount of streets. And a lot of those are high speed roadways, typically happening in some places that are traditionally underserved. So low income minority communities. So 34% of our traffic deaths occur on 5% of our streets. And you can see that in the map here on the right of our high injury network. And so really what we're now shifting towards is we already influence products that are submitted to us by providing higher ranking of safety products that are on these corridors. But then we also as staff are starting to look into these more in detail to figure out solutions, some countermeasures to reduce deaths and serious injuries. We already talked about the Vision Zero communities throughout the country. Some of the ones that have set resolutions locally include Belglade, Boynton Beach, Delray Beach, Palm Springs, and West Palm Beach. A lot of those are, as we talked about, really that first step in creating a resolution and then starting to work towards taking action. So if anybody else is out there looking to pass resolutions, we can help you even draft that resolution or come talk to your communities about that and what it means for your community, and then help you through creating an action plan. Some other TPA resources we have for you all that many of you have already taken advantage of. We do walk bike safety audits with community members. So when you request those, we have our staff go out with you all and sometimes DOT as well to assess certain communities and look at the needs. And then we publish that data on our website on an interactive map. We can help you in supporting some of the planning studies you have. So there's money that we can help provide with your money as a match to have like a mobility plan or any type of safety action plan associated with that. Not just the money that we're seeing coming down for the federal government related just to Vision Zero, but we have other planning funding available. We also have corridor studies. We have complete streets design guides on our website. And then we also do TPA funding of capital projects. So we have funding sources for transportation alternatives, local initiatives, and then also on state roads. So when it comes to any type of idea you may have, you want to get implemented, you can always work with us and we can see if it's something that's appropriate for one of these programs. And even if it's not, we can still work on that with you all to see where it might be appropriate to go after new federal funding that's out there now. And as you've already heard about the new Safe Streets money that's coming available, large increases, millions of dollars every year, going to be out there for safety. We'd love to collaborate with you all on those. There's a lot of ideas already going out about the notice of funding opportunity that's coming out. So we're looking to submit ourselves, and we're looking to hear about any of your ideas, and hopefully we can help you all with your submittals. And we have more information on our website at palmbeachtpa.org/safety. Some other Vision Zero resources. Many of these are already mentioned. As we talked about, these will be provided afterwards in PowerPoint, like in a PDF. You can see these links later on. Ones I wanted to talk about a little bit today with you all. Like I said, the state of Florida has provided a lot of great tools that have come online recently. One of them being the flcompletestreets.com, which can provide some great visual tools and ways to show how you can implement complete streets in your communities and all these safety features. They also have a lot of great information on their safety page at f.gov/safety. And then FHWA has a whole slew of resources. One of the ones recently they have up there that I really like is you can see a whole list of all the action plans that have been passed throughout the country when it comes to Vision Zero. So, we're an NPO, so we typically like to look at a lot of other work that NPOs are doing. They have a lot of those, but if you're a smaller municipality or a larger city, they'll have ones that are really peer organizations or communities for you. And then obviously the Vision Zero Network, who is here with us today. Going to some of the resources, there is that Florida Complete Streets website I just mentioned, and you heard about contest classification today a little bit briefly, and this is an example of that. So they have different types of contests for different types of your communities, right? So going from like urban out to rural, and just an example of what you can do on a street based on context classification, right? So catering to the needs of that community in the context of the surrounding land uses. And here's just an example of one that's called Urban General. And you can see an existing condition out there. And what you can do on the website is actually look at different scenarios for it in this context and starting to see the design of it to improve safety and integrate complete streets. So in this example, going to the current standard that DOT has, they provide bike lanes, they have enhanced crosswalks on this. And then if you go even further, you start to see other types of ways of improving safety, right? So near the one there on the screen, you'll see an extended median to provide more refuge for pedestrians. You see green pavement in the complex areas for bicyclists, and also integrating other types of safety features. So we really like to use this website. I like to use it just to showcase what kind of things can happen in simple ways to further safety on our roadways. And this is really my last slide for y'all. Next steps. We talked a lot about sort of the actions that you can take moving forward. Many of you might be in different sort of steps in the process. The first one I wanted to touch on was just looking at available resources. There's a lot out there. And what we've been finding is that a lot of these communities, even before going to a resolution, they want a lot of information just to be well-versed with their staff, and then being able to educate their board members or community members on that before they even go to a resolution. So there's a lot of available resources out there. We have previous resolutions available. We can also provide updated presentations or some data summaries for you all in your communities, or help you along with some of those websites that I just mentioned. And then obviously there's adopting a Vision Zero resolution, and it doesn't really stop there. It's then getting into a Vision Zero action plan. And some things I wanted to stress in that, and some takeaways that I think we've had here at the TPA that have sort of been hurdles in the past. One would be understanding your role and trying to develop actions towards that. So I think the first key is obviously communication and making sure everyone who's involved is all together and communicating well together. Sometimes when our first go at a Vision Zero action plan and seeing like what we could do, we realized as a metropolitan plan organization, we're not roadway owners. We don't enforce the laws. And so there were some actions in there that really the outcomes were really catered towards other people in the community, like law enforcement. And so the way we geared it our second time around when it came to our updated Vision Zero action plan is we really refined those to figure out how we could do our part in that E, whatever it is. So for example, when it comes to enforcement, it's like, do they have the resources available for enforcement? What can we do as a TPA level to assist them in that, even knowing that we're not the ones in charge of it? Another good example is when it comes to education and outreach, right? There's tons of material already out there when it comes to what the state provides with Target Zero, a lot of other pamphlets and great information and flyers, and they have campaigns throughout the year where we don't need to be doing those sort of things ourselves. We can already take some of those resources and then cater it a little bit more for our community and not spend so much time on something that's already sort of been done, right? So a lot of those actions we have in our new plan are really catered towards like furthering everyone else's actions that they have in their roles, and figuring out how we can be integrated into that as well. And then it's understanding your community issues and needs. So those resources provide high emphasis areas where there's specific funding towards those areas that we have issues with, and then identifying your high crash locations. And then there's evaluating and reporting on progress, which we do annually here at the TPA. That's really all I had for you. Is a pretty high level. I'd love to take any questions you all might have and how we can help you out in the future.
Thanks, Andrew. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now. If anyone wants to ask any questions, we can make sure that you get the answer after in our post email. We will be gathering all the links and information from all the presenters, and we'll be sending out an email with a survey on Monday. And Valerie, did you want to say any final thoughts?
No, just thank you all so much for sticking with us through this webinar. I hope it was helpful. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to everyone who joined us. As Cassidy mentioned, we'll be sending out more information. The links we heard about this webinar will be recorded. So really, we are a resource to all of you, and we thank you for your interest and your time.